So thanks for coming in to the M.E.N office.
Thanks for having me.
Many people think that the job of Prime Minister is now yours to lose. That must be an incredible amount of pressure on you. How are you coping with that pressure?
Well, the first thing is not to accept the premise of the question. In other words, we've got to earn every single vote. We can't be complacent. There's a huge job to do, and we need to persuade people to vote Labour by answering the question, what difference would Labour make? And that's why I've been setting out the big things that we want to change in government. So we're going to have to fight for every vote. I don't look at this through the lens of me or anybody becoming Prime Minister. I look at this through the lens of what have we got to change for our country, what have we got to change for Manchester, a huge amount that we need to do. Just had a session here at Manchester Evening News, and bubbling with ideas and challenges, that's what drives me forward. That's not a burden, that's a responsibility, but respecting and earning every vote is hugely important.
So how are you going to win the votes of the 2.8 million people in Greater Manchester, and in particular red wall seats likely? Why should people in those those areas come back to Labour?
Well, firstly, because the Labour Party now is fundamentally and unrecognisably different to the Labour Party that they rejected in 2019. When people across Greater Manchester reject the Labour Party in the way that they did in 2019, my first job is to change the Labour Party and make sure that we're facing working people in Greater Manchester and their concerns, whether that's cost of living, cost of energy, all the things that, connectivity, trying to get around the place, transport, they're the things that drive me forward. And therefore it's working with and putting the Labour Party back in the service of working people.
And you talked earlier about opportunities, sort of the differences in the north and the south. So we sort of covered that in there, working closer with our local leaders. We know that your relationship with our Mayor Andy Burnham has been rocky at times. When's the last time you went for a pint with him? How are you getting on now?
I saw Andy at breakfast this morning. I saw Andy last night at a drinks reception. I'm seeing Andy again tomorrow. Our relationship is actually really good. And when I came into Parliament in 2015, I went straight in to work with Andy and his team. The great thing about that is that if we do manage to come into government and serve, then you will have a Labour government in Westminster working with a Labour mayor in Manchester. So none of this fighting, Manchester having to sort of fight for everything, buffing up against the national government, working together. What a difference that would make for Manchester, where the Prime Minister and the Mayor of Manchester are working hand in glove to make sure that we're meeting the challenges and providing those opportunities for everybody across Greater Manchester.
So if you do become Prime Minister, what would be the first thing a Labour government would devolve to Greater Manchester? Would you consider giving Andy Burnham tax-raising powers, for example?
Well, Andy and I are in that discussion, and in terms of how do we make sure that more power, more decision-making, more resource goes to Greater Manchester. I'm determined we're going to do this. We need to get it absolutely right. But I strongly believe that those with skin in the game make the best decisions about the place that they're in. So people in Greater Manchester are going to make better decisions about Greater Manchester than somebody sitting in Westminster or Whitehall. So Andy and I are in discussions about what's it going to look like, what more powers and duties and responsibilities and partnership can we establish to make sure that Manchester thrives. There's brilliant stuff going on in Manchester, great innovation, great individuals. There's a real Manchester identity, and it cuts across politics and culture. We need to build on that, and Andy and I are in discussions about how we're going to make that work.
Because as a party, you've talked about devolving power in other parts of the country and sort of using Greater Manchester as a bit of a model. But by the end of the first term of a Labour government, will Greater Manchester have more power devolved as well than it currently does?
Yes, and it will be a driver of what goes on in Manchester in an even more influential way than it is now.
Can you say what kind of thing, what sort of field are we talking in? What was going to be more devolved than?
Certainly when it comes to the economy and driving a sort of economic powerhouse in Greater Manchester. You see elements of that already. Look at what's happened in the city centre. But that's not happening everywhere. So particularly on the economy, making that work. Great new jobs for the future that could be in a Manchester hub. So the economy will be the driver of this, and has obviously got responsibility for bits of health as well. We've been talking with Andy Burnham this morning about how we expand on that and make that work. So I think we will be able, working together in tandem with Andy Burnham and other leaders across Manchester, businesses and communities as well, to really turbocharge the progress that we can make in Greater Manchester.
On transport, which is obviously another
Yeah.
really big issue, are you still committed as a party to building Northern Powerhouse Rail? And if so, what will that include? Because it means different things to different people.
Yeah, we on Northern Powerhouse Rail, yes, we are committed to it. Obviously, there's been real bitter disappointment, I think, in terms of what this government has done, not just to Northern Powerhouse Rail, but HS2 and the making of promises to Manchester which weren't kept. And it's not just the transport, it's everything that goes with the transport, the infrastructure. Now, what I've done with our mayors, Andy, Steve Rotherham up in Liverpool, Tracy Brabin over in Yorkshire, is to say, right, let's now all get together and say, what does Northern Powerhouse Rail have to look like?
So you haven't got an answer yet as to what it
No, but
looks like.
the reason for that is
It's still
because
in-
I want Andy to have a say in that, I want Steve Rotherham to have
Yeah.
a say in that, I want Tracy Brabin to have a say in that. But we're going to do it.
So you've committed to the concept, the
We're
details
committed
of
to the
where it
concept.
will go, what
Yeah.
will be new lines, hasn't been decided yet.
Commit to the concept, also commit to working with the local leaders to make it sure that they are satisfied that this is going to be good for Greater Manchester.
And what about HS2? Have you ruled out bringing that back?
I think that it's impossible now to do HS2 as it was originally conceived.
The land hasn't been sold back yet, so it is still possible. The bill's still in Parliament.
The government has blown the budget, the contracts are being cancelled, the land may or may not be sold, and I think that it's not fair for me to commit to something that I don't think is going to happen.
But have you ruled it out yet?
Yeah, I mean, it's not
It's not going to happen.
No.
Okay. On housing, you've talked about wanting to build 1.5 million homes
Yeah.
in the first Parliament. How many of them will be council homes?
Oh, a good proportion will be council.
Have you got an
committed.
idea of...
No, but we're working with developers on what that looks like. 1.5 million is a huge commitment. The biggest barrier is not necessarily how many are going to be council houses, social housing. The biggest barrier is how do we get the planning, the infrastructure, the community involvement that is needed to get these houses built. Simply stating a number doesn't get houses built. You've got to have a strategy and a plan for doing it.
I wanted to ask you about the Israel-Gaza conflict. It's sent big shockwaves through Greater Manchester.
Yeah.
How would you heal the divisions that it's created in a place like this?
Well, I think we all have a responsibility to work across different communities to ease the tension that we've got, because what's happening internationally has had an impact here in Greater Manchester and across other parts of the country. So there's the responsibility here to work with local leaders, community leaders, religious leaders, faith leaders, to reduce that tension, to build those bridges, to be absolutely clear about hate crime of any sort, but also, of course, there's a responsibility to work with international leaders to ensure that hostilities in Gaza come to an end. What's happening in Gaza is intolerable. We need a sustainable ceasefire, and that means we need a roadmap for getting there. And that is why I'm talking to international leaders to say this has got to happen. We can't tolerate this number of deaths in Gaza. We have to find an end to this.
And just one final quick fire question. You're in Manchester today, obviously you've had quite a busy day. What would you do on a day off in Manchester?
I would try and find someone who'd take me to either City or United to go and watch a football game.
I thought you might say that. Thank you very much.
And I've been to both grounds many times.